Welcome to another episode of Help Nobody Told Me. I am your host, Shannon Johnson with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. And of course, my co-host today is my partner, Jasmine Shapiro.
Hello. And we are so fortunate to have a dear friend of mine who is Susan Snyder. She is a mental health counselor. She is in private practice. She provides psychotherapy to individuals, couples, and families. And she works collaboratively with her clients to reduce isolation and stress while helping them identify and manage life's challenges with compassionate and supportive care. In addition to your clinical work, Susan has guided numerous families through the emotional and practical difficulties of a loved one's declining health. And personally, Sue, you have helped me. I recently lost my mom.
Yes, I'm very sorry about that.
Thank you. But it was about maybe 3-4 years ago. You and I were walking one day, and I was just mentioning to you how frustrated and sad I was that my mom wasn't the mom that I knew my whole life. She was the most amazing human being and always there for me. And all of a sudden, her health challenges took center stage.
Right.
And I'll never forget you telling me, well, Jasmine, you are mourning the loss of your mom right now, even though she's still alive.
It's true.
And we deal with a lot of people going through transitions, and this podcast came alive because, Shannon, you were going through some challenges with your parents.
Correct.
And we realized nobody really told us how to do anything.
Right, exactly.
And so that's the name of our podcast,
Yeah.
is Help
Well,
Nobody
hopefully
Told Me.
I'll be able to navigate and help you through this because
Yeah.
it's not easy. And I've gone through it myself.
Yes, you have.
You know, aside from my clients, I've also lost 2 parents and have been the sole caretaker for both of them. And I didn't take a class in college. You know, there wasn't a
There isn't a
101 caretaking
No.
class. So
No.
it was, it had to be done, and somebody
Right.
takes the reins.
And there's usually one person in the family
Yeah.
that does take charge.
Right, there does, it does seem to be that way, and that's where some of the problems come up. You know, we have all kinds of families, all kinds of communication, all different kinds of relationships. Some are healthier, closer than others, and nonetheless, everybody has an opinion. Everybody now is coming to the surface, and they're triggered, they're emotional, they have some guilt, they have some remorse, and now they want to step up. And it's a difficult time to try to organize it and set your priorities.
Right.
So, what are some healthy ways that you can manage that stress
Right.
when you're dealing with all those family dynamics?
Right. It is, well, it is very stressful, and I think that's number one, is to identify it and acknowledge it and realize that, give yourself some grace. This is a really difficult time, especially if you've never done it before. And it really, you know, some of the relationships are more meaningful. They have more impact than others, and that will also have an effect on how stressful it is. And also, too, like how many people are involved. You know, do you have siblings? Do you have uncles and aunts that want to become involved? And who takes the reins and who starts to organize what needs to be done first? So as far as stress, just recognize it's tough. When the dust kind of settles and you realize that maybe it's just on one person or 2, make sure that you try to acknowledge that, get rest. Number 1, sleep. If you're not functioning at your highest, everything is going to get more and more stressful. Nutrition, making sure that you make time to eat meals so that you have nutrition and energy to take care of this, because the emotional stress will deplete you as well. Making sure that you reach out, that you don't have to be the hero.
I think a lot of people have trouble doing that.
Yes, a lot of people think like, oh, I'm abandoned by my family. My friends don't really understand. They've never lost a family member before. It's all on me. And so you feel like you have to do everything by yourself, and that simply isn't true. Even if you have a history of always having to do things independently and only relying on yourself, this is a time to grow. It's a time to step out and ask yourself, what can I do differently this time? Because this is really hard on me and an emotional toll. And it's a trigger. It's just, it's very, very emotional.
And I think you're also an example to your children
Mm-hmm.
when you're dealing with situations, whether
Yep.
they're happy or they're sad or they're difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Your children are observing you, right?
Right, exactly. So it's a time to, depending upon the age of your children. I mean, my father was suffering from lung cancer when my kids were 5 and 3. And luckily I had a very supportive husband who was there for me to support me as well. But I also thought at the same time, people were like uncomfortable with me having my father in my home, dying in my home, and watching me take care of him and feed him and bathe him. And I just didn't agree. I thought it was a great opportunity for my children to see the circle of life.
Right.
And how, my father was there for me, and now I'm going to be there for him. And not everything has to be pleasant, and it was a wonderful experience, actually, having my father in the home while the kids were little. And they didn't understand it all, but they did see, and they saw the modeling of the parents taking care of the responsibility. It's not so much what we say, it's what we do.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to the stress of the situation, getting, your sleep, your nutrition, trying not to be the hero, trying to ask for help, even if it's from friends. If you don't have relatives, you just have to kind of be vulnerable and allow yourself to say, I'm limited. I think I'm at my limit. I am not helping this person in the capacity I would like. I need help.
Right.
And hopefully you have a circle of nice supportive people that can do it, that get it. Some people don't understand it. Maybe they didn't have to deal with a dying parent, a sick parent. Maybe they didn't have a really good relationship with their parent, so they couldn't really understand why you'd want to be there, when they're in a nursing home, when they have doctors. But it's advocating for yourself. Acknowledging what you need will help the stress. And if you, in your budget, if you have it, ask for resources. Pay for services. If you can afford to have a cleaning woman now because you're preoccupied with caretaking, that would be a great stress reliever. Or maybe cook less and maybe cater meals in for a while if you can afford it, if it's within the budget. Anything to ease the stress and acknowledge that this isn't forever.
Right.
Unfortunately, it's not forever. It's a moment in time. It's difficult, but at the end, you probably will feel very good about it. And there is something to say about caretaking. As difficult as it is, it's also can be a wonderful time to repair relationships that haven't always been optimal. And it's also a wonderful time to just spend time with the person that now has limited time. And so
To be able to say your goodbyes and to
Yeah,
have peace both
yeah.
for you and for the one suffering.
right, and learn to focus on the positive, because at this stage of the game there really isn't going to be much change, but to focus on the things, attributes, characteristics in this individual that you respect and loved, and try to be realistic. No one is perfect.
Right. So what are, we're talking about, that individual who's sick or ill. What are some ways that we can ensure that that person still feels valued and respected?
Right, that's a really great question. I think that is so imperative, because just because somebody is ill doesn't mean they're not a person. They're a whole person, and you can't forget that. Just because they may not look alike, they may not be able to act the same, they may not be able to have the same capacity, but it's really important to focus on the individual, the self, and to listen to them. It's threatening for a person that's losing their health losing their sense of control in their life. So they need to know that whoever is there to take care of them cares about them and really can hear them, even if they don't agree. It's time to just listen, pause, actively repeat back what you heard, and then try to interject, something that may need to be challenged. Many a times some people may not be realistic. Maybe some people aren't able to ascertain their quality of life that's remaining. Some people don't want to stop driving. Some people want to do their checkbooks. Some people still want to pick their doctors. And that's all fine if they're capable. But if they're making mistakes, it's costing money, they're getting ill care, it really is important to step in. But step in very gently with care, and letting them know that you're there for them because you love them, and that you would like the same thing done for you that you're doing for them. And keep acknowledging, like, this is hard. I would not want to be in your space. I get it. This is a difficult time for you. Try to trust me. Try to let go. Try to relinquish control if you can. And to agree with them. If they come up with one or two things that they really, really, really want and you don't understand it, what's the harm? Give in, compromise, make them feel that they still have an investment in their own outcome of the remaining of their life.
I think that's a good point. I know oftentimes my mother, years ago, but she would say, like, oh my God, I look like an old lady. I don't recognize myself in the mirror. And, make comments like that.
Yeah.
And, I would say, I know, Mom, but you're still beautiful. You're still beautiful on the inside. And, we go through changes. I mean, listen, all of us, if you ever had the stomach flu or something, you know how you feel.
Right.
But we know we get better.
Right.
And so you do have to kind of acknowledge,
Yes.
but try to make them feel better.
Right. Always let them know that you're listening. And sometimes less words are better. Just listen and shake your head up and down. It's hard. I understand. This
And
is
then-
not an ideal situation.
Right.
Because once a person is heard, their anxiety, their defense mechanisms decrease. And you'd be surprised that they become easier to work with.
And don't you think that they're happy you just showed up, even that you're there?
Yes and no.
Oh, really?
It all depends. Some people don't want any help. They don't recognize how vulnerable they are and how much they could be in danger. And it also depends upon the relationship. Like if you
Right.
have an ideal relationship with a child, a daughter, a son, a cousin, an uncle, you'd welcome the company, maybe, but it depends upon their perception of whether they're going to be like interfering with their life, telling them what to do, taking away their freedoms. They're going to possibly be defensive. And that's where I think it's so important. Even with like teenage kids, it's like parents know better, right? We all have lived enough experience to know. The kids don't want to listen to us, right? They want to do it on their terms. So it's a very difficult situation, and it takes a lot of diplomacy and stepping back and being patient. And a lot of times these conversations want to be done all at once. And that's usually like unrealistic. It's almost like you have to plant the seed of what's to come and let them digest it. And you don't have to problem solve and let them know everything all at once. Just let them know that you're here, you're involved, you're interested, you're curious, you want to learn more about where they see their lives going, how they see handling their illness, how they ask them what they feel that they're capable of doing. Like, can they get up and do and get dressed? Are they able to take a shower? Are they able to organize their medicines? Are they able to reorder their medicines? Are they able to drive to their doctor appointment? Are they able to call an Uber? Are they able to manage their schedule? These are the things.
Well, getting to the doctor is one piece, but the next piece is, can they retain and communicate the information given to them by the doctor?
Exactly.
That's a whole
That's
different.
a really good point. And that's
Different
where
situation.
sometimes people welcome another person to take notes, and 4 years are better than 2. But you just have to let them feel like you're there to support them and that they're still in the driver's seat. And it's a delicate balance.
And I think it's hard for the caregiver, because if you do have children at home, if you're working, you're like solution based,
it's
you know,
true.
like let's get this done and move on. But what you're saying is you got to have some patience and
Yeah.
let the older person digest it. And I
Yes.
don't think we're wired that way always.
Right, and plus the caretaker has their own family, they have their own job, they have their own
Right,
deadlines.
own pressures.
They have their own financial stressors. They may also have their own health issues, and they may have children issues. So it encompasses a lot.
Right.
And that's where I think it's also important, like if you do have a support system, or if you don't, try to find one, to ask a friend, would you be able this month to take my dad to the doctor? Just one time.
Right.
That could relieve you so that you could attend your business meeting. Asking. And that's hard to do because people will disappoint you. People will come around and not always be there for you.
Right.
And that's the tough part.
Well, and I think the tough part of that for caretakers is that there's some guilt and some resentment in there as all of this starts to build up. So how does that caretaker process that? When they want to be sympathetic to mom or dad or whomever, but there's
yeah.
some resentment there,
Absolutely.
and it's difficult to even communicate with them, to care for them.
It's so true.
How do they handle that?
It's
how
hard.
do you
I've had
approach
that. I've had 2 sisters that were unavailable. And it was completely on me. There was at a point where I wish I was born an only child. And so I had a lot of anger. I had a lot of resentment taking care of my mother, who I did love. So I had a mixed ball of feelings. Like, I want to be there for my mom. I'm grateful that I can help her. It feels good to help her. But at the same time, it'd be so nice to have support from someone else that lives locally. That didn't happen. So what do you do for something like that? You have to come to terms of accepting it, because you know that you can't make anybody do something, and you can't change anybody's behavior. You could voice your needs of what you feel that you need, but if people are unavailable, unwilling, they have their own narrative, there's nothing you can do but focus on the fact how fortunate you are that you're able to spend that time with the loved one, do good, feel good. And there's research that says caretaking actually increases your mood if you're not overstressed. And that's where it's so important to come in and try to develop a support system. And you'd be surprised, there's people that feel good helping you.
Yeah.
And they want to. And there's lots of things like meal trains now, and there's Sign Up Genius that people can take advantage of. And I think it's just asking.
Right.
And you'll be surprised. You'll ask, you'll let people know what they need. It just drops. Because if people don't go through their own experience, they don't understand what is needed.
Right.
It's true. So, what are the biggest mistakes that families make when they're planning for long-term care, and how can they avoid some of that?
Yeah. Well, most people are naive.
And planning probably being the key word.
Yeah. Most people are naive. They think that they have insurance, they have a beautiful assisted living place or a really beautiful nursing home close by, and nothing works as expected. So as far as that goes, how do you handle it? Be flexible. Be flexible. Know that it's going to be frustrating. Know that things are never going to be done as well as they would be if you were doing it. But it's a system, and you're reliant on so many people to take care of this one individual. So what do you do for it? You plan as much as you can. You delegate a spokesperson that is the person in charge. One person has to be in charge. And communication is key. And planning and making sure you have the right facility, the right doctors, the right medication, planning financially that it's affordable, and then the proximity of where everybody is. You could have relatives from one coast to the other. You could have relatives living in other countries, and you'll have to decide on how to delegate the things that they can do from a distance.
Right. Right.
Did I answer your question?
I think so.
Okay.
So, how can families, you talked about people who find peace in caretaking. For those who don't, how do they find some meaning and some connection in these difficult moments?
Well, if they don't, I think it's an opportunity for them to maybe search inward on something internally inside themselves that's possibly missing, because we're all, in my belief system, is that we're all connected, and there's ramifications of our actions. So usually what you give is what you get. And if you don't enjoy it at all, I think it's time to really examine your internal belief system of why. Why is it that you're not appreciating this time? Is it work? Is it finances? That's understandable. I mean, we can't live up in a cloud.
Or is it the existing relationship?
Right, of course. And understand that, it's probably too late to really come to closure on things that may have been impacting you in your relationship your whole life. But maybe just pausing and having an opportunity to just
Put that aside.
put it aside and look at the positive and appreciate and have gratitude for what you were able to learn from that person and what that person gave to you to be where you are today. And that's like turning a negative into a positive the best you can. But I think it's also important to own your feelings. Like, some people are stuck taking care of people that they have no respect for. They have to take care of people that are, really shameful people that they would not
And
choose.
they may have very valid feelings.
Exactly, and it could be very true.
Or the person you're taking care of doesn't appreciate what you're doing.
Right.
And then you can
right.
get resentful.
It's
too.
really hard. Well, you're never going to change people that are like have an attitude where they don't have the sensitivity to understand or the empathy to understand what you're going through. That when people are sick and they're under stress, they become extremely internally focused, very self-absorbed. It's pretty natural. It's a survival mechanism. And so you have to kind of give them grace, give them space. Like, they're suffering. And they're not going to be there for my feelings right now. This is all about doing the best I can to make them as comfortable as possible. And personally, it can be selfish for you, because when they do pass, you have a sense of peace. Like, you're not feeling guilt. You're not feeling regrets. That can haunt you for the rest of your life.
Right.
And that's something I've experienced with taking care of both my parents. I miss my parents, but I wouldn't take it back. Taking care of them was really an opportunity for me to get to know them, nurture them for their most vulnerable times. It's a circle of life, right? They did that for me when I was a newborn.
Right.
I couldn't do anything without their support, and I felt like, what's my turn? And I think, we talked about the kids. I think it's really important to walk the talk.
Yeah.
So if you want to have children that are going to be available for you, it's the best way to do that is to role model and do
Right.
it.
So how can families approach financial discussions, like about medical care, assisted living? you want to start having these conversations when your parents are of sound mind. You don't want to wait till trying to guess what they want. Like, when do you start having these conversations?
As early as possible. And I know, death is always, it's a cultural, it's very cultural. There's some cultures that are more willing and open to discuss it. And some people have a lot of fear about discussing the end. And being able to recognize where your parents or this loved one is will be helpful. So I think it's coming from their frame of reference. Like, where are they coming from? What do they think about their end years? How do they perceive how they'd like to be taken care of? Where would they like to be taken care of? Do they want to be at home? Do they want to have hospice? Do they want to be in the hospital? All these things. And financially too. I mean, when grown adult children are probably in their 50s is when you should have that discussion about parents' finances. And that's really delicate and sensitive because parents feel like you're starting to control, they're starting to lose their freedom, you're starting to think that they're not quite as sharp as they were. And money is very emotional, and money is also very personal. So, and it's always a sticky subject.
Right. Well, and we've experienced even, situations where the kids live out of state and they come home for Thanksgiving or Christmas and they're shocked at how mom and dad have declined. But mom and dad don't recognize it. They see each other all the time.
I know, it's shocking.
So they think you're crazy if you bring something like that up.
I know.
And that's, I think, a really hard conversation to have. But
in a perfect world, if you had those conversations before.
Right.
My mother was very, very, very practical. She would have these conversations from the very beginning. She was the one that wanted to get long-term care. She didn't want to rely on her kids. She didn't want to rely on her kids' money to take care of her. I was very, very, very fortunate.
Yeah.
But that's not always the case.
Right.
And
but for our listeners, even the kids of parents, if you could take something away, it would be you initiate the conversation with your kids early on, right?
Right.
Don't wait for the kids to have to come to you.
Right.
It should be something you put in place, whether it's a trust, a will, whatever your wishes are.
Right.
Put it down when you're of sound mind.
Yeah. And even have like a third party, like have a meeting with the family accountant.
Right.
Have a meeting with the family attorney and let that person facilitate the meeting.
That's a great idea.
So that the two of you can come to terms with an expert, a professional, an outside party to kind of just, play the...
Not emotionally involved with these decisions,
less
but guiding
emotional.
you. Yeah.
Less triggering.
Yeah.
And the parents will probably have more trust in a stranger versus their own kids, depending upon the relationship.
Right. Or a professional.
Because some adult kids really don't have the right intentions.
Right.
There are grown adult children that are interested in just knowing
the gain.
The gain. And that is a reality, unfortunately. And you also want to prepare it so that the siblings aren't going to be fighting once this happens. So, and to expect that. When siblings are involved and everybody's vying for control and everybody thinks they're the expert, that's another source of problem. So that's where these conversations are so important to have early on, where the parents decide who's going to be the executor of the will, who's going to be in charge of the medical.
Right.
All really important, even down to, the burial plots and the funeral.
Right. Nothing should be assumed.
Right. But it's hard. I mean, we're asking a lot.
Right. Well, we could go on and on and on with you. We might have to have you come back. But
I would love that.
But you gave us a lot of good information.
I hope so.
A lot to think about.
Yes.
I hope so.
And so thank you so much for coming. We will put all your contact information.
Yeah, and the links too will be very helpful.
Yes,
to just
we'll put that all in the show notes.
Right. Very
Absolutely.
good.
So thanks for hanging out with us today and talking through a very difficult subject matter.
Yeah.
And thanks to our listeners who sat back and took all this in today. And we hope you'll tune in again for another episode of Help. Nobody told me.